Yeah.
You know, that made me think of, I know I'm just jumping right into the middle of a sentence, but that's okay. That made me think just now when we were waiting for it to go live of Brendan's Daily Fire today was about having something to anticipate in the new year. And
Mm-hmm.
I just love that you and I were both like, I pressed the button to go live and then we're like, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? It felt like a mini anticipation moment. So hello and welcome to anyone who might be here now or watching later on. I'm Sherry Richert Belul, and this is my first live stream in 2026, and I'm welcoming Mr. Shawn Buttner, my fellow coach. Hello, Shawn.
Hey, Sherry. How's it going? This is also my first stream of the new year. So,
Live. Nice. It's a little
eh,
bit, what were you just going to say?
my Siri in my house activated because it heard Sherry. So it's talking to me. It's like, hopefully you didn't hear that, but
I didn't. And she was probably like, hey, it's my first live of the year too. So, first of all, I just want to say thank you, Shawn. It has been such a wonderful thing. I know that typically when people see us, maybe they're used to us talking about the hard stuff is okay, because that's
Mhm.
usually what we're here talking about. And I hope we'll return to those in the new year for sure. Um,
Oh, definitely.
and right now, the reason we're here is because of the love list of a lifetime. You have it.
Whoa.
So some people know that I launched an end of life planner at the end of last year, and Shawn was one of the people who I interviewed for the book. And I don't know about you, Shawn, but it was really fun and interesting and enlightening in a lot of ways for me to go and read the book again way after all those interviews had happened, right? Because I
Mm,
think we did the interview a year and a half ago when I was writing the book, right?
wow. Wow.
Right? Wow.
Yep.
No. And so when I went back and I was like, oh, I want to talk to Shawn about, some of this end of life, some of the things that you and I particularly focused on. And I went back, I thought, wow, this was really great. I don't know if you felt that way,
I
but
thought it went pretty well, but yeah, going through it again, it was a little surprising that the David Bowie thing made it in, which
oh,
was I thought was funny. But yeah, it's interesting too, being a couple of years away from some of the things we did talk about,
yes.
how things have changed or some of it's kind of stayed the same. So
Yeah. Well, okay. First of all, I can't talk to you about what we're going to talk about unless you tell us about the David Bowie thing, because now people are going to be like, what is he talking
oh.
about? Why is David Bowie in her end of life book?
Yeah, well, so we were talking about end of life, and then we were talking at Curry Up, I believe, in San Francisco. And as we're talking, it reminded me of his last album, Black Star, which is kind of this. He knew that he was going to be passing, and so he did this like artistic tie up of his life of all the characters he was on all the different albums and kind of a lot of themes of like coming to an end or closing, or it was just a very like I remember hearing that album and then reading about it and just being really entranced by this, making a moment of the end of your life, which I think your
Yes.
book is also trying to do in a lot of different ways, is to make that moment as joyful as it can be in a very serious and sad and sometimes, and I'm going to say morbid, but like end of life is not something people really love to think about or dwell on, but it's important to address.
And I'm
And so, oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, being an artist to make that a work of art and meaningful in a dignified way is maybe the best of what we could hope for at the end of our lives.
sorry, I got excited because because when you were talking about making end of life joyful and meaningful and maybe even sad, and the word that came to my mind was bittersweet, which is one of our shared words, right? Which is, and I think I can only imagine that for most people for most people, I think end of life is bittersweet, right? It's
Hmm.
neither this nor that. It's the everything of it. And I like that you brought the David Bowie piece in because partly because we weren't planning to talk about that. And I love when we're kind of just organically talking about things. And
Hmm.
just to add to that for people, so that part, that quote from Shawn about David Bowie is in the part of the book where I'm talking about how important it is to leave our story behind. And in whatever form, I mean, that could be a written form.
Mm.
I loved that you said that about David Bowie because people have all sorts of different creative ways of sort of saying, like, this is my life, you know.
Hmm.
And I thought that was beautiful what he did. I'm not familiar with the album, but just from what you described of it. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's it's groovy. So
Well, and I that was just like a fun little, that was like an amuse bouche, I think, to our conversation today. Um, and so what I was most drawn to in the moment from some of the different things you and I had talked about, and it was that experience that you had when you were at your dad's house in Chicago, cleaning, sorting, sifting, trying to pare down his belongings. And I think for
Mhm.
most people that I talk to, when I talk about end of life, one of the most anguishing places for people is that place of, oh my gosh, my loved one has passed away. I have a house full of stuff. It all meant something to them. I don't know what to keep. I don't know what to give away. I'm in grief. Like, I'm watching someone go through that
Mhm.
right now, and it is so
Mm.
hard. So, just could you speak to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think um first off, I think it was surprising at how difficult it was. It's going to be a lot of work, but the emotional impact of it was way deeper than I realized. And like as you're sorting through stuff of these important relics and artifacts and everyday sundries, I guess that's the right word,
Yeah, sure.
everyday effects of people, you don't know what's important or what's not. And there's a lot of things in the house where I'm like, why do you still have this?
Yeah,
There's a lot of also like my dad was alive during this process. And so a lot of it is trying to like deal with the emotionality of well, this reminds me of your mom, or it was too much for me to deal with. When we were cleaning out the house, she was still very much there, even though she had been passed for I think like 6 years at that point, 6 or 7 years.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
the chair was still there, like her last journal was still there, like all these different things, and to have to throw away a bunch of stuff and wonder and like still I mean, I guess today looking back at it, because this conversation was a couple years ago, it still haunts me, all the stuff we gave away, like my dad's career was a craftsman. He had a bunch of tools, and we had to find a home for those.
yeah.
And I just remember like him being so distraught over
Wow.
that because we didn't have the time to do it in a way that maybe is a little bit more thoughtful and a little bit more gentle. It felt very abrupt having to go through that experience. And so, like,
Can I interrupt you for just a sec? I
of
realize
course, of
that you
course.
didn't really quite set the stage for your particular specific
Yeah.
example, right? So obviously, for anyone just joining in or anyone who may not have quite grokked what was happening. So I interviewed Shawn for my end of life planner about this process of sorting through a loved one's belongings, because this is a very common experience when someone passes. It is also a very common experience if we have an elderly parent, a parent who needs to be moved to assisted living or to someone else's home, which that was the case of your dad, right? You were kind of needing to move your dad, and you didn't have a lot of time for that
Hmm.
process, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We were moving him to be closer to my brother so that somebody would be around to assist him a bit more.
Right.
And also to kind of get him out of this place where there's a lot of just daily reminders of grief,
Wow.
which I like didn't realize going into it. Like, and that's probably a whole other conversation, but I'll just highlight that. But yeah, we needed to move him for a number of reasons, and yeah, that was yeah. The trucks were coming, the people were moving, and I had like 2.5 weeks to get him ready to go, and get the house ready to pass back to the landlord and all that stuff. So,
And for anybody who has ever gone through, I know I have my own stuff, like trying to go through, let's just say a box of paperwork, for instance, or a box of memorabilia. It is not a fast process because, and I think this is what touched me so much when you were telling your story. First of all, it was just you and your dad. And of course, there's a lot of emotions whenever we're doing this sort of thing, but particularly when the stakes are that high, right? Like if I'm going through a box of stuff, it's pretty easy for me to say like, oh, I'll deal with this later, or, I can't make a decision on these things. But I,
mhm.
you had to get things pared down to move him. So what
Yeah.
was, yeah, so tell me, I mean, if you could put yourself back, I know, and it was a very hard moment, but back in that place of, trying to sort through things, what was your process?
Uh, Part of it was, I mean, there was a deadline, right? So, I mean, as much as that was painful, it was also helpful in that you can't dwell on things too much.
Yeah.
Um, and we knew how much space we had to, uh, you know, fill the truck to move across country, so there were some constraints that were actually kind of helpful, I think.
Right, right.
The thing with the box of papers you don't know what to do with is that there's always tomorrow. And it's not like, oh, this has to be figured out in 2 weeks, or we're leaving it, we're taking it. Those were the two choices. It's not
Yeah,
a deferred decision. um and then it was just really kind of for him, like, what are essentials, what are important documents, what are, like, we had like 30 years of tax documentation. Like, you don't really need to carry this around. I'm not sure why it followed you this far,
right.
So, there's a bunch of stuff like that. There were letters from, different phases in their lives. And so that was probably the more tricky part,
Yeah.
for, letters my mom kept from, family members that were in the military that were writing home, or
Wow.
uh, letters of, like, my dad had a really terrible car crash when he, like, before I was born. And so there's, like, get well notes from people I never knew.
Yeah,
And so it's like, okay, like, I know that these are important people to you, but, you know, haven't been around for 40 years, so
right.
what's the story behind that?
Yeah,
Um, so trying to do that, and then trying to find places for things, and, like, when you're also under the gun with that, not a lot of time, like, things. So my dad rented a big dump truck to, like, throw away tons and tons of stuff. So like, old pieces of furniture that I remember growing up with, like,
wow.
didn't get sold, didn't get given away, got chopped up or smashed with a hammer and tossed in a garbage bin. And you're just like, literally, I remember my dad standing in front of the dumpster and being like, "This is my whole life in a trash can," and just like, ah, you
But let
know,
me pause for a sec because I remember you saying that or something similar, and my heart
yeah,
just did right now. And I think the reason I want to pause is for anyone listening again, who's listening right now or listening later, who may have just joined in. But it's like we're talking about the amount of life that we all accumulate that is in the form of stuff. And that one of the hardest things, whether it's like you with your dad when he's needing to start a new chapter with much fewer things, or someone's passed away and we're sorting through their things, that it is just emotionally wrenching to do.
Mhm.
And so we can circle back and you can tell some more of this story that feels pertinent. But I also want to give people a little piece of proactive hope that I loved this idea that you had. I don't know if it was something you ever did. Do you know what I'm talking about at the end of that story where you're doing me to prompt you?
Uh, Please prompt
I'll
me.
prompt you. What you said was, this is a great reminder that one of the things we
Mhm.
can do is to do an annual spring cleaning with the people we love, particularly maybe if we have older parents, I think is and I thought that was such an amazing idea because it speaks to what you're saying about everything was so rushed. There really wasn't quite enough space to, let's say, donate that couch or find the right homes for
Mhm.
those tools.
Mhm.
So the idea of slowly going through with people, those 30 years of tax documents, for instance, could have been gotten rid of 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
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 So I just wanted to
It-
bring that in because that was so positive.
yeah. And if I remember talking to you about this too, and the idea being there's so many things that you don't know the story behind.
Yes.
And having that moment of connecting with, oh, like, I actually had a box of stuff from that experience come through, and we were talking about that a little bit ago. And I had like a toy wooden horse for my grandfather, right? That I thought was lost, but we found it at the house. And, just story of how that came to be, and talking to my dad about that was really positive. And kind of remembering that my grandfather, I never met my grandfather, he passed away before I was born, but he was a woodworker and he had made toys for all the grandchildren up to that point, and that was like the last like project he had. And that's a really powerful, cool story, and that artifact is still with us. And we
Yeah.
understand. I just thought it was a toy growing up, but it was like, oh no, there's an emotional connection to it that we now can
Yeah.
tell that story going forward, which is cool.
I love that so much. And one of the things that I've probably because of your influence, and actually most likely, is I've been asking my mom, like photographs, for
Mm.
instance, that don't have people's names on them, and I'm like, what's the story behind this? Was this important? Here's a big wedding, and I see you as a little kid, but who's getting married? And
Mhm.
those things that had I unfortunately waited until after she passed away, I would never know, right? And I think so. Your spring cleaning idea is also really important because it's enabling us to ask those questions along the way,
Yeah.
right?
And it was amazing. I thought I knew a lot more about the stuff
Yeah,
than I actually did. Like when you're faced with it, you're like, oh wow, okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like that. The other thing that I think you told me was about a letter from Einstein. Was that?
So that's my wife's
Oh,
family. So when her dad was a little boy, he wrote Einstein and got a letter back, and it's like framed up in his office in their house, which is really cool. And so hearing him talk about like that whole process for him was really super cool. And I know they have a bunch more like artifacts like
yeah,
that from their lives of like artists they met like growing up in New York and stuff. But it's just it adds, could you imagine like going through some papers and then like seeing this thing like from Einstein? You're like, what happened here? It's like
right.
addressed to the person like.
Right. And so, again, this may seem obvious to people, but just a reminder, right? Document these things, one of the fastest ways to do this that I recommend in the book is that if you have a smartphone, which many people do, you could just videotape, you
Mhm.
could videotape that artifact, you could videotape someone talking about the memory of it, and then boom, just file it away somewhere in I have a family history folder on my
Mm.
desktop that, may or may not, not all of that stuff is probably going to get passed along, But part of my own, planning for my end of life is sorting through these things now. I've collected a lot of stories, and but I do know some of them, especially around jewelry. Like a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
it's passed down, and oh, who owned that ring? Oh, that came from my grandmother. Oh, was there a story? Oh, that was her wedding ring. I didn't know that. Like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those sorts of things. So I love that our conversation brought up all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting to think that growing up, especially in the States, I don't know, like if you have this impression, but like how we view family and family history, I think it feels different than it might be from other areas of the world that are a bit older. And
Right.
to have a tradition of maybe doing this as a family, to keep those stories alive, to keep things passed down that are important, or just like a cool reminder from when people were crazy to like do the thing, or I don't know, like maybe we might find that like all the like, Kodak photos and the chemicals in them are really terrible for us and leaching into the environment, but like we have family and photos from that when people didn't know about it. I don't know, I'm kind of
See,
out of off on a rant, but you know what I mean, like.
I do, because, and I particularly want to hone in on what you're saying about, I feel, and it may be my own family culture but I do feel like in the United States, we're all about like starting again and, tearing buildings down and putting them back, putting new things up. And I don't think we are as well skilled at, remembering to handle the past with care, because we're so forward thinking, which is a great thing, I think, about the American culture. But
Mhm.
to that point, a lot of our family history does get lost. And so, one of the other things that's coming up that I just want to remind people about, that I really appreciate and am hoping to start doing this myself, which is passing things along now. Like,
Mhm.
I have two nieces who are in their 30s, and it's a good time to start saying, like, hey, this was a necklace that your grandmother, gave me, right? And telling the story and passing it down now. I am also documenting this stuff with photos and short stories, so that, if it does get
Mm.
lost, I'll have the document for them. But just a reminder to people, like, none of us knows how long we have here, and none of us knows how long the people we love are going to be here. And that isn't necessarily always, back to the word bittersweet, right? Like, it's not always sad and morbid. I mean, sometimes what it means is we
Mhm.
get the chance to fully be present with people now, to share the stories
Mhm.
that maybe we wouldn't share if we thought, oh, they're always going to be here.
Yeah, and that sense of lingering connection after someone's gone, it's much. I love that part of it too. Of like, oh, this is our shared history together. And anytime you see that picture of your great 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 aunt or uncle or
Yeah.
grandparent, like you're like, oh, like you know, the ring that you gave your niece or the necklace or whatever is from that era. It's really cool. It's a way to lessen the loneliness you might feel sometimes with grief, I
That's
think.
Yeah, Shawn, that's really beautiful. That is really beautiful. I love that. I love that. And I think also, to your point about maybe sort of lessening some of that intensity of grief, the more we talk about it, it becomes a little bit less of a shock, less of a, a complete wave that takes us under, because we're sort of preparing ourselves as we go. And I can't emphasize enough, I think, how important that piece is in a culture that really doesn't quite love to look at the idea of death, but it's here around us all the time. So
Mhm.
I'm super grateful to you, and I hope that people who have the book will enjoy. There's 3 or 4 or 5 places where I have stories from you. Thank you, Shawn.
Oh, it's amazing.
And I really appreciate you being willing to come in the middle of a Monday and talk about something. Back to, usually we're talking about the hard stuff is okay, and this does not
Mhm.
fall outside of that topic, does it?
No, Not at all. But it's important, and I think it's helpful. So it's worthy.
Yes. And so, I know we have to head out, but was there anything that you kind of thought, oh, I really want to make sure I talk about this before we go? Do you feel like you were able to cover the main points of that idea of spring cleaning?
Yeah, I think we covered the moments. I'm glad you brought up the Einstein letter as like the example of how it could be really great. And I think as much as people, maybe this is a ending thought, but as much as you might dread having to do this work for people you love, it's strangely connective and can be very rewarding in a way that's unexpected and in a way that I think is really beautiful if you allow yourself to be open to it.
Shawn, I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for ending with that. Right. And I had said how you had inspired me to start to have these conversations with my mom about some of her
Mm.
belongings. And it's beautiful. I mean, we spent an entire evening when I was just there with her a few weeks ago looking at photographs. And it gave it kind of a quote unquote purpose, like sometimes it's hard to get her if I'm just like, hey, let's look at photos. But I was like, hey, I really want to look at these photos from, this era. And she loved it. And all these stories came out, and it's incredibly connecting. It's a beautiful way to
Hmm.
spend time with people. And I think that's another thing we don't do enough is just tell stories together.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Amen. Agreed.
Listen, thank you. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate all of our the hard stuff is okay conversations, which we will return to. And I appreciate
Hmm.
that you played such a beautiful role in this book with your own stories and quotes and your openness. Really appreciate that, Shawn.
Well, I'm
Yay.
glad it was helpful. Thank you for involving me in your project. And it does, it's weird. Just as an aside, it feels weird, like knowing that I have quotes in a book, but it's kind of cool too. So,
That's
but
really funny. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, yeah, there you go. That's something for you maybe to pass along to other generations that, hey, look, this was part of my story. So, well, thank you so much. Thank you again. Anyone who happens to be here now or later watching. And yeah, so I hope that you'll just consider some of these ideas, particularly just leaving you with Shawn's idea. Do some spring cleaning for yourself, but also with your elderly parents and start to get that
Mhm.
process, those stories going now. So thank you, Shawn. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Sherry.
Mwah. Till next time.